And just to let everybody know that our sessions are being recorded. We mentioned it in the first webinar, but just to let you know that they are being recorded. Welcome back for the second of 4 webinars in this webinar series on coding and staging. My name is Sarah Knell-Crooks. For those, I don't think anybody's joining that hasn't joined before, but for anybody who's new, I'm the program coordinator for the Caribbean Cancer Registry Hub, which is based here at CALF in Trinidad and Tobago. And your facilitator today is the same as it was last week, Wednesday. It's Miss Casey Felix. She's a research officer at the Dr. Elizabeth Comina Cancer Registry in Trinidad and Tobago as well. And she has many years experience in coding and staging, and she received IARC training to be a train the trainer training to be a regional trainer in coding and staging. Apologies, I just heard that my mic is a little soft. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, great. Apologies, everyone, if you didn't hear. Good morning and welcome to the session. I was just saying this is the second of our 4 webinar sessions in this webinar series on coding and staging, and that, like last week Wednesday, this session is going to be facilitated by Miss Casey Felix, who's a research officer at the Dr. Elizabeth Comina Cancer Registry in Trinidad and Tobago. And she has many years experience in coding and staging for cancer registry work. And she's also been trained at IARC in coding and staging. So once again, we're going to run this webinar session similar to that last week. If you have any questions, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A option. Please go ahead and type your questions directly into the question and answer box, and we will either address them after or during the session as soon as we can. And Casey, can you just mute your mic? We're just getting some feedback. Thank you. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A box. If you are unable to find that, but you are seeing the chat box, then please go ahead and type it in the chat box. I'll be checking both as we go along, and we will try to answer all questions that we receive. There were lots of questions last week about if we were sharing the materials, and I indicated that we would certainly be sharing the recorded session, and that we needed to confirm if we could share the presentation files. So I still need to discuss that with Casey, and I also have a meeting with an officer at IARC tomorrow. So I will confirm that for you this week for sure. The recorded session, however, has been loaded, and Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, onto the forum space. And what the forum space is a forum that's been developed by the hub, by the Caribbean Cancer Registry Hub. And Casey is going to send emails maybe today or tomorrow, and I'll follow up with Casey on that, that will give you directions for how you will log in to the forum. And on the forum, we will have the option to download the recorded webinar, and then you can keep a copy of this. Okay, and you can watch it as many times as you need to. Okay, so we will follow up with you either later today or tomorrow on access to the forum space to download the recorded webinars. If there are any questions about that, please go ahead and type those in, and we will respond to that as well. Okay. And Casey has been kind enough she's going to review just a quick recap of what was covered last week to make sure that everybody's on the same page and we all know what book we're coding from and what we're using and how we're coding, and then she will continue with the topic, the rest of the, I think we're coding morphology today in this session. Okay, again, if there's any questions from stuff that was covered last week or anything that's covered this week, please go ahead and type it in, and we'll answer those probably whenever she takes a break or at the end of the session. And you can always email if questions come up after the fact. Please email me and we will follow up with you directly. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over. Just before I hand it over to Casey, I'm just going to hand it over to Casey first. For those of you who have not met Casey Husbands is the IT specialist based at CARFA for the Caribbean Cancer Registry Hub. So he's providing all the support for the webinar series, and he does all of our forum space and web-based development. He's also a CanReg 5 expert. So if anybody that needs help there, if you contact me, I can put you in touch with him. But Casey, can you just go through how they would access the forum space and what information they'll be receiving about that?
Good morning, everyone. I will be using the email that was used to register for the webinar, and I'll create an account with a default password. I'll also send a couple of screenshots in the email to show you how to change the default password, and it will have a direct link to the hub forum space where we'll either have links or the video itself will be uploaded of the presentations.
And they can expect that email when?
By the end of today.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so once again, welcome everybody. I'm looking forward to this session, and I'm going to hand it over to NKC now.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Once again, my name is NKC Felix, and I am the research officer at the Dr. Elizabeth Kwamina Cancer Registry, which is the National Cancer Registry of Trinidad and Tobago. So as Sarah pointed out, I will just start this session by quickly reviewing some of what we did last week, particularly parts that will also fall into the coding of the morphology. Okay, so before I go over the topography rules that we did last week, I just wanted to review the behavior and grade / differentiation, which plays an important part of the morphology code, right? Once again, as I said last week, these behavior and grade and differentiation codes are located on the pages between the numerical list and the numerical topography list and the morphology list. At this point, I just wanted to quickly remind you all the book that we are using, that is a staple, is the ICD-03 book, which is the International Classification of Diseases for Oncology, 3rd edition. If you have the physical book, more than likely you may just have the 3rd edition that was first printed, and if it is you have the PDF that you downloaded and printed, that is the 3rd edition, the first revision of the 3rd edition, which was reprinted in 2011, right? So the behavior and grade codes are located on the pages between the numerical topography and morphology lists, right? If you have the book, you could just open it up now just to look at it. They have the codes listed as well as the explanation for what each code represents. The behavior code is the 5th digit after the / of the morphology code, right? The behavior code indicates the pathological behavior of the neoplasm, whether it's benign, in situ, or malignant, right? And most registries in the world would only collect cancer with behavior codes 2 and 3, which is in situ and malignant. And the grade differentiation code is the 6th digit after the / of the morphology code. It describes how much or how little a tumor resembles the normal tissue from which it arose. And it's very important for our purposes, we only code to the grade of the primary tumor. So therefore, if it is what you see on the pathology report is the grade of the metastases, we would code that to 9 as unknown, because we do not know what the grade of the primary tumor was. Pathologists use different grade systems for certain sites. They describe the tumor grades by levels of similarity, right? So there's like a 2-grade system for colon cancer, 3-grade system for prostate cancer, bladder, fallopian tube, etc. And this picture here is a screen grab from the PDF version of the book. This is basically what it is you would see, an explanation of the behavior codes as well as the 6-digit code, which is for the grading and differentiation. And we'll go a lot more into this in a little while as we explore how we code morphologies. At this point, I'm just going to now go over what we did last week quickly in the form of the topography rules. Okay, So last week we went through the coding guidelines for topography, right? General coding guidelines, such as that we code the site in which the primary tumor originated, even if it extended to an adjacent subsite. We code to 0.9 for single primaries when multiple tumors arise in different subsites of the same anatomic site. For example, an infiltrating duct carcinoma in the upper outer quadrant of the right breast and an infiltrating duct carcinoma in the lower inner quadrant of the right breast, we're going to code it to 59, right? Because these are multiple tumors arising in the different subsites of the same anatomic site. More general coding guidelines, just quickly reviewing. If a tumor is metastatic and the primary site is unknown, we're going to code the primary site to C89, which is for an unknown primary site, right? And this is just represented to, if it is you get a pathology report that states that the cancer is a metastasis to the lung, and we don't know where it metastasized from, we would have to code not to the lung, but to an unknown primary site. The topographic site of a neoplasm may be described by a noun or its related adjective. For example, on the pathology report, you may see pontine glioma, but if you were to use the alphabetical list to look that up in the ICD-03 book, there is no code for that. But there is, you would notice that there is a code for pons, which is the noun for the adjective pontine. So that's all it's basically saying. That if it is you see a topographic site of a neoplasm being described by either noun or its related adjective, you just look for, like, as I said, if you see pontine listed, you look up pons to see if pons is listed with a code before you say that it's not in the book, right? And if the medical record does not contain enough info to code to the site, you will consult a physician advisor if available, or you would use not otherwise specified for the organ system or an ill-defined site code, right? If you don't have any information at all, once again, you code to unknown, which is C80.9. Okay, and these are the rules that we went over, that we did last week, that I'm just going to quickly go over right now, right? So rule A, which says topographic, which is related to topographic regions and ill-defined sites. The summary for that is basically stating that you code as specifically as you can with the information that you have, right? The example, once again here, is that if it is the pathology report states osteosarcoma of the ankle, you will code as specifically as you can with the information you have. We know osteosarcoma is a cancer of the bone. So despite the fact we have several non-specific codes available, we would use the code for bone because we know that osteosarcomas arise from the bone. Once again, malignant carcinoma of the arm. We know carcinomas arise from epithelial cells of the skin. So we would code to skin as opposed to an ill-defined site code. As I said, the implied rule here is to code as specifically as you can with the information that you have. Avoid using ill-defined site codes if possible. Rule B was about prefixes, and this rule spoke about when you can't find a code for the anatomic site term, you have to use the code for ill-defined site, right? And this referred to prefixes such as pre, peri, para, supra, infra, area of, region of, right? So we spoke about how that there are many prefix terms in the index, but if it is the term is not listed, we would have to code to the ill-defined site of the area, right? So paraspinal, which is beside the spine, there's no code for paraspinal listed in the alphabetical index. So you will code it as an ill-defined site of the back. Next example, perigastric, around the stomach. There's no code listed for perigastric in the ICD-03 index, alphabetic index, so therefore you code it to ill-defined site of the stomach. Peribiliary, around the biliary tract, once again, it's not listed, so you code it to the ill-defined site of the stomach, of the abdomen. Once again, once you cannot find the code for the anatomic site term, you're using the ill-defined site code. You do not quote a primary site mentioned when the tumor is described as near that organ. You would have to code it to the ill-defined, use the ill-defined site code. Okay, Rule C spoke about if you can't tell where a single tumor started in an organ or system, you have to use the code for overlapping sites, which is to 0.8, right? So the example we used here was the like tumors of the breast that are located at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, which basically is when two quadrants are joining. If there's a tumor located at any of these sites, you would have to code it to 0.8 because the tumor would be overlapping. You cannot tell which quadrant the tumor started in. You have to code it to as an overlapping site. Some examples here: a serous cystic adenocarcinoma involving left ovarian fallopian tube. You will code it to overlapping lesion of the female genital tract. Mucosal carcinoma of the hard palate and alveolar ridge. You code into the primary site, overlapping lesion of lip, oral cavity, and pharynx. These were just some examples of overlapping site codes, which are all listed in the book, and you will also find them in the numerical list to the front under each category. The implied rule here was if you can't tell where a single tumor started in an organ or system, you use the overlapping site code. Very important to note, it does not apply to non-adjacent sites, such as squamous cell carcinoma of the skin of the forehead and skin of the forearm. You'd have to code that to 9. And it does not apply to separate lesions, such as separate tumors within the same breast, in two separate lesions in 2 quadrants. You have to code to 9. Okay, Rule D spoke about coding the lymphoma to the site of its origin, whether that be lymph nodes, extranodal, or extralymphatic, right? The special rule here involved the fact that lymph node chains do not have to be adjacent. Therefore, if a lymphoma arises from more than one lymph node chain, you can code it to C77-8 and it does not have to be adjacent, right? Example of Rule D, Hodgkin lymphoma of the cervical lymph nodes. You're going to code that to C77-0 because you're coding the lymphoma to the site of the origin. Mold lymphoma of the stomach, C69, coding the lymphoma to the site of origin. B lymphoma of the iliac and femoral nodes, C77-8, because this is a lymphoma that arises from more than one lymph node chain. Doesn't have to be adjacent. We code it to C77-8. Primary lymphoma of the femur, C42, because we are coding to the site of origin, right? And Rule E, which was the simplest and most straightforward rule, is that you code all lymphomas except myeloid sarcomas to C42-1, which is for bone marrow, right? The following are also coded to bone marrow: multiple myeloma, refractory anemia, polycythemia vera, myelodysplastic syndrome, and other hematopoietic diseases. So that was basically what we went through last week when we looked at topography, which was the site of where the cancer arises. This week, we are looking at morphology, which is morphology, which has to do with the type of cell that the cancer arose from. So similarly, as for last week when we went through the topography, we will go through general coding guidelines for morphology first, and then we'll go through the rules for the morphology coding. Okay, so general coding guidelines for histology. Histology can only be coded after multiple primary determination has been made. Right? So in this case, this is if it is the diagnosis indicating more than one histology, we only code to the histology when we determine if it's one primary or more than one, right? And Gonzalo will go into multiple primary rules in the last week of this webinar series. If there's no tissue, you code the histology the medical practitioner uses to describe the tumor, right? So sometimes you'll come upon a case whereby you don't see a histology report within the medical record, and you just basically have to code based on what the medical practitioner used to describe the tumor within the medical record itself. And you use the histology stated in the final diagnosis from the pathology report unless a more specific histology is definitively described elsewhere. For example, in the micro or comment section of the pathology report. General coding guidelines continued for behavior. You collect in situ and malignant always, right? You code the behavior as malignant, which is /3, if any portion of the primary tumor is invasive. You code the grade from the final diagnosis of the pathology report, right? And in this case, it would be like if it is sometimes you may see during the description on the pathology report, you might see different grades. You code in the grade from the final diagnosis, right? You code the grade from the primary tumor, not from a metastasis or recurrence. We had mentioned this earlier. We only take the grade from the primary tumor, right? Not from the metastases, or if the cancer recurred, we are not taking that grade. We only want the grade from the first occurrence of the cancer. If it is that's unavailable, we code to 9 as unknown. If the tumor has invasive and in situ components, you're coding the grade of the invasive component of the tumor. If the invasive component is unknown, then we code to 9. Right? So that was the general coding guidelines, and we're going to go into the rules for morphology now, right? Now, I just want to take this opportunity to just mention all rules are located in the book. All the rules that I'm going through for both topography and morphology are located in the book. It's the summary is located on page 20 and 21 of the physical book. It may not be the same pages in the PDF, but it's right to the beginning. So if you just scroll to the beginning, you will see a summary of all the rules that you could always go back over and refer to when it is you feel like if it is you need a refresher. Right? So rule F is behavior code in morphology, also known as the matrix principle. This rule states that you use the appropriate 5th-digit behavior code even if the exact term is not listed in the ICD-10. Now, what this means is sometimes they may be, you may be seeing something on the pathology report that you don't see the exact the code with the behavior that is necessary in the book, right? So the example to give here is a borderline epithelial tumor, right? If it is you, just take the book right now and look up epithelial tumor. right? You would notice there are codes for benign, there are codes for malignant, and there is no code for borderline. So what this rule is basically stating is, even though there's no code for a borderline epithelial tumor, you use the code that they have for epithelial tumor, which would be 8010, and you put the appropriate behavior code, which would be 1, right? So the implied rule here is that it is okay to change the behavior code to accurately report what the pathologist said. We have the example here that the pathology report stated adenoid squamous cell carcinoma in situ, right? And ICD-03 only lists 8075-3, which is the adenoid squamous cell carcinoma. Behavior 3 meaning malignant. It is okay to change the behavior code to 2 to indicate in situ because that is what you saw on your pathology report. Important to note, most cancer registries collect only behavior 2, which is carcinoma in situ, non-invasive, non-infiltrating, intraepithelial, and behavior 3, which is malignant, primary site, right, invasive. If diagnosis comes from a metastatic site, the cancer registry records the primary site and the morphology with behavior 3. What this means is, if it is a pathology report states metastatic adenocarcinoma in lung biopsy, which would mean that the cancer they're seeing in the lung is a metastasis from somewhere else, it would not be coded as C3498146. It would be coded in the cancer registry as C889 because we do not know what is the primary site that the cancer metastasized from, 8140/3. Just going over that once again. If the diagnosis comes from a metastatic site, the cancer registry only records the primary site and morphology with behavior 3. Right? Okay, moving on to Rule G, which deals with grading and differentiation. Right? We are assigning the grade or differentiation code described in the diagnostic statement, the highest grade or differentiation code described in diagnostic statements. Now, as I said before, differentiation code is the 6 digits in the morphology. So just recapping, the different differentiation codes are grade 1 for well differentiated, grade 2 for moderately or intermediate differentiation, grade 3 for poorly differentiated, and grade 4 for undifferentiated/anaplastic. You use 9 if the grade of differentiation is not determined or not stated. Now the 6 digit is also used to identify T cell and B cell origin for lymphomas and leukemias, right? Very important to note, the cell origin, which is known as the phenotype codes, which are 5 to 8, take precedence over the grade codes 1 to 4. Cell origin or phenotype codes are grade 5 for T cell, code 5 for D cell, code 6 for B cell, including pre-B and Br precursor, code 7 for null cell, which includes non-T/non-B, code 8 for natural killer cell, and once again, you use 9 if the cell type is not determined or applicable. Use the 6-digit grade or differentiation code as a check where the terminology is included in the morphology term. What this means is you double coding any statement of grade in the diagnostic term. For example, if the pathology report states anaplastic astrocytoma, you would, when you look up in the alphabetic index, you will see the code for anaplastic astrocytoma is 9401/3. Because the word anaplastic is also terminology for grade, you're going to code the grade as 4. So that's where the double code comes in. Because you will be coding anaplastic astrocytoma And then you're still going to code for the anaplastic grade. So the total code, complete code will be 940134. An example to Rule G, right? Which is coding to the highest grade stated in the diagnostic statement. Moderately to poorly differentiated adenocarcinoma of the prostate, right? Moderately differentiated is grade 2, poorly differentiated is grade 3. The highest grade in the diagnostic term is poorly differentiated, so therefore we are coding to grade 3. The complete code will be 8140/33. Right? There's a clarification to Rule G, right? Very important to note that in certain instances, the term grade does not represent differentiation, but is instead a synonym for category. And in these cases, the 6 digit should not be coded as a grade, right? For example, follicular lymphomas do not use the grade that is stated. If they say low grade endometrial stromal sarcoma, you can't use the grade in this case, right? You only do not use the grade when it is it's used as a synonym for category, rather than actually meaning the differentiation of the cell from the original cell. If it is here, let me just repeat that. This clarification to Rule G, you do not use the grade in circumstances where the word grade is used as a synonym for category, right? The example they use is follicular lymphomas, because follicular lymphomas may be different grades, but that in that case, the term grade there is being used as a synonym for category and not to mean differentiation of the cell, right? Rule H. Rule H speaks to site-associated morphology terms, right? And what this rule states is that you use the topography code provided when a topographic site is not stated in a diagnosis. This topography code should be disregarded if the tumor is known to arise from another site. Now, what this states is, sometimes when you look up certain morphology codes in the alphabetic index, you will see a topography code in parentheses next to the code, right? And these topography codes are the most common site associated with the neoplasm, such as follicular adenocarcinoma. You will see that there is C739, which is for the thyroid, in parentheses. And adenofibroma, not otherwise specified, you will see it will have C569 in parentheses next to it. This also occurs with in the CANREG 5 program once you enter the code, the morphology code for follicular adenocarcinoma. When you do the search, you would notice if it has a site in the topography code that is not associated with this morphology, the program itself will flag it as a query or as rare. If a site given is different from the site indicated by the suggested site code, you use the site code appropriate to the diagnosis, right? What this is saying is, like infiltrating duct carcinoma of the head of the pancreas. If you look up infiltrating duct carcinoma in the alphabetic index, you will see in parentheses C50, which would indicate that they're suggesting the site code is breast. But the pathology report says that it's arising from the head of the pancreas. Therefore, you have to code the topography to C250, which is head of the pancreas. Right? Just repeating that if a site that is given is different from the site indicated by the suggested site code, you're using the site code appropriate to the diagnosis. Therefore, whatever is stated in the pathology report would supersede whatever site suggestion you see in the ICD-03 book. More examples here, right? Examples of terms that use a root word mentioning a site. Nephroblastoma, you will see it would have in parentheses C649 for kidney. Thymomas, you would see they would have C37-9, which is for thymus in parentheses. Choanogenic carcinomas, you will see it will have C21-2, which is a choalcogenic zone of the anal canal. Bronchiolar carcinoma, you will see it will have C34 in brackets, which is for the bronchioles of the lung. And hepatocellular carcinoma, you will see it will have C22-0, which is for liver in parentheses, right? No suggested site code is listed when a malignancy could appear in many different sites, such as for adenocarcinoma not otherwise specified. Right? When it is you see the suggested site codes in parentheses next to the morphology, sometimes the last digit, which is the subsite, is open, right? And what that would indicate is that you would have a choice of different subsites. So therefore, you can refer to the numerical list, which is to the front of the book, to select a subtype code, and you code the complete 4-digit primary site. So for example, a melanotic melanoma of the forearm. When you look up this morphology code in the book, you will see it listed as 8730/3 with the suggested site code C44-, right? You see the pathology report would say of the forearm, so you're going to go to the numerical list in your front, look up C44 for the subsite code, and then look under C44 for the subsite code for forearm, which is 6. So therefore, the complete diagnosis would be coded to C44.6, 8730/3. Right? So in this case, the pathology report diagnosis is malignant pheochromocytoma. Right? If you look that up in the book, feel free to look along as I speak. Okay, have you found it? If you look this up in the book, you would see that it has a suggested site code of C74.1, right? So in this case, because the pathology report just says malignant pheochromocytoma, we will assume that the primary site is the medulla of the adrenal gland, and we're going to code it as such. Right? So the implied rule here is that you use the suggested site code as a guide to code the primary site. But if the site in the pathology report is different, you code to what the pathology report states. You just though have to be careful because certain neoplasms have names that could be interpreted as implying a topographic location, but these neoplasms should not be necessarily coded to that site. So for example, so that you would review the anatomic location carefully to assign the correct code. The example here we have is 8163, which is bile duct carcinoma. The suggested site codes is either C22-1 or C24.0, which is the intrahepatic bile duct and the extrahepatic bile duct. It's very important for you to review the pathology report carefully or any other information that you have available to code it to the correct code. Okay, Rule J is a very short rule. It just basically speaks to compound morphology diagnosis. What it states is, you change the order of a word, roots in a compound term if the term is not listed in the ICD-3, right? So therefore, some compound words have multiple root words, right? So myxofibrosarcoma, you might see this on the pathology report, but when it is you go to your book and you go to M and you try to look it up, you would notice that myxofibrosarcoma is not in the ICD-3. So in a case like this, you would just double check and make sure to break it into root words, myxo, fibro, and sarcoma, and switch around the root words and then look up the new term. If it is you were to look up fibromyxosarcoma, this is listed in the ICD-3 as 88 81/3. Once again, this rule is just looking at compound morphology diagnoses, and all it's basically saying is that if it is you have a compound morphology diagnosis and you cannot find the word that you see stated on the pathology report or any medical record, you break it down into root words and change around the root words, then look up the new word to see if it is you find it in the book. In the example they have here, myxofibrosarcoma, you break it into myxo, fibro, and sarcoma, and then you just switch it around. Look up fibromyxosarcoma, and that is listed in the book. Okay, Rule K could be a little complex. It looks at coding multiple morphology terms, right? What it is they suggest is the first thing you do is you look for a code that represents the combined morphology, because common combinations may have a unique code, right? Multiple morphology terms usually say mixed or combined or and, right? For example, mixed embryonal carcinoma and teratoma, which is a teratocarcinoma, or ductal carcinoma and lobular carcinoma, which would be 8522/3. So some examples of Rule K is carcinosarcoma, which is 8980/3, adenocarcinoma and squamous carcinoma, which is an adenosquamous carcinoma, 8560/3, and lastly, small cell large cell carcinoma, which is 8045. Now, these are all combinations and mixed terms that you can find in the book. In the case of the adenocarcinoma and squamous carcinoma, even if it's listed as adenocarcinoma and squamous carcinoma on the pathology report, you like that term is adenosquamous carcinoma, you would be able to find that in the index as adenosquamous carcinoma. Once again, Rule K, when no single code includes all diagnostic terms, use the numerically higher code number if the diagnosis is a single tumor, that includes 2 modifying adjectives with different code numbers. Now, that just sounds like a lot, but what it's basically saying is code to the higher code number if there's no combination code. So, in the case of adenoid cystic spindle cell carcinoma, so we see in this term that we have adenoid cystic carcinoma and spindle cell carcinoma. Right? In this case, if it is you look it up, you would notice there's no combination code. When you look up spindle cell carcinoma, you would see that it is 8032/3. Adenoid cystic carcinoma is 8200/3. So therefore, you're coding the morphology to the higher number, which is 8200/3. Right? Transitional cell epidermoid carcinoma. We have transitional cell carcinoma, and we have epidermoid carcinoma. So if we take the book now and we look up transitional cell carcinoma, we're in the alphabetical index, and we just flip to T for transitional. I'm looking along with you all. Okay, so the code for transitional cell carcinoma is 8123. And now we're looking at epidermoid carcinoma. Flip back to E. Epidermoid carcinoma, we see the code for this is 8070/3. Out of these 2 codes, 8123 is the higher code. So therefore, we would code the morphology of transitional cell epidermoid carcinoma to 8120/3. Lastly, we have mixed mesothelioma and neuroendocrine carcinoma. Once again, we're looking up mesothelioma. And we see the code for mesothelioma is 9050/3. We look up neuroendocrine carcinoma. We go to N and we look it up. And we see that the code for that is 8246/3. So therefore, we will be coding to 9050/3 because it is the higher code. Exceptions, right? Rule K does not apply to separate tumors, nor to the hematopoietic diseases in general, right? For the hematopoietic diseases, you code to the more specific histology over the higher code, right? So once again, Rule K only applies to mixed tumors, not to separate tumors. And it does not apply to the hematopoietic diseases in general, right? So therefore, what that is saying is, if it is you have two codes for diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which is 9680, and mantle cell lymphoma, which is 9673/3, you will not just automatically code it to 9680 because it is higher. You would notice that 9680 includes a not otherwise specified term and 27 synonyms, while 9673/3 does not include a not otherwise specified and has fewer synonyms, which means that it's a more specific code. So therefore, we would code it to 9673/3, right? So this is the example here. Once again, we would not just for the hematopoietic diseases, you don't just automatically code to the higher code. You code to the more specific histology, right? And the example they use here is for diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which is 9680/3, and mantle cell lymphoma, which is 9673/3. When you look it up, you would notice that 9680/3 contains a not otherwise specified term and 27 synonyms, which is like, you know, it means that 9673/3, which does not include not otherwise specified, has fewer synonyms, is the more specific code. So even though 9680/3 is higher, you would go to the more specific code in this case, which is 9673/3. So that concludes the morphology rules. Just like topography, there are 5 topography rules, 5 morphology rules. Similar to last week, and as I have been telling you all, the best way for any of these things that I'm speaking about to really sink in is to practice, right? And in practicing now, like the concepts and everything will just kind of get a bit more solidified, because it is a lot to take in, right? So what it is we're going to do now, we're just going to pause if there are any questions, and then we're going to do an exercise on morphology coding.
And Casey, there's just one question. If you quote the pages in the book as you go along so that they can follow.
Okay. Yeah. But as I keep saying though, the physical book and the PDF pages are slightly different. So like as in the page numbering, which is why I'm just trying to give like an idea of where it is so you'll be able to find it on their own. Okay, so what it is we're going to do now is a quick morphology exercise. Okay, are we all seeing the morphology exercise?
Yep.
11 questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so just like last week, we just give you all about, Sarah, how much, like 20 minutes?
Yeah, that sounds good. We can
Okay.
check in at 15 minutes just to see where everybody's reached.
Right. So just using the book and just filling out or writing on a paper, just go through the exercises, and we'll come back in 20 minutes and go through the answers and just kind of explain like how it is we came to the answers that we got. Okay? Okay, just before you all start, I'm seeing another question just came in about the implied rules for double coding. So I'll just quickly go over that before the exercise. Okay, so this is what we are looking at here. The double code rule refers to if there's any statement of grade in the diagnostic term, right? So the example they used here is for anaplastic astrocytoma. If it is you see the term anaplastic astrocytoma on your pathology report, and you go to your alphabetic index and you look it up, you go to A, and you look up under anaplastic, you find astrocytoma. The code is 9401/3. Now, the actual morphology diagnostic term is anaplastic astrocytoma. However, anaplastic is also a term that speaks to the differentiation of the cells. So therefore, you also code the grade to 4 because of the word anaplastic being present in the diagnosis. So that's why they refer to it as a double code, because you're going to code anaplastic astrocytoma as a morphology, as well as you code the term anaplastic as the grade. So the complete code would be 9401/34. Okay, so once again, morphology exercise. We'll check back on you all to see how you all are getting along in 15 minutes.
I'm just checking in with everybody. Do you need another few minutes? We'll let's give everybody till 11:15, so another 5 minutes, and then Casey can walk us through them. Okay, I hope everybody has had a chance to at least attempt all of them. In case you do want to walk us through the answers.
Hi, yeah, no problem. Okay, so I know you may not have been able to finish all, but we'll see how far you got, and then I'll just go through the rest anyways, right? So for the first one, it was 8140/3, 9, right? In the alphabetic index, we see that adenocarcinoma, not otherwise specified, is 8140. Behavior is 3, and the grade is 9 because there was no mention of grade. For number 2, the answer was 8070/29. Once again, using the alphabetic index, we're looking up squamous carcinoma. In situ, we see that the code for it is 8070/2 and 9 for the grade because once again, there was no mention of grade. Okay, number 3 was 8130/32. 8130, the code for papillary transitional cell carcinoma, behavior 3, and we have the grade as 2. Right? If you all have any questions or the answers or anything, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll get to it once we go through all the answers. Okay, number 4, we have 8500/3, grade 3. Now this question referred to Rule G, which stated that we quoted the highest grade in the diagnostic statement. So it said moderately to poorly differentiated duct carcinoma. So moderately differentiated is 2, poorly is 3, so we're quoting to 3, which is the higher grade. Right? For number 5, the code is 9401/3, 4. Once again, this is Rule 3, Rule G, but this refers to the double code rule where we are double coding any statement of grade in the diagnostic statement. So therefore, as I went through right before the break, we see the term anaplastic in the diagnostic statement. So after we code for anaplastic astrocytoma, and infiltrating would already indicate that it is malignant for behavior 3, and anaplastic astrocytoma is 9401, we will use once again code anaplastic for the grade, which is 4. Number 6, we have 8332/32, right, as the response. So we have 8332, which is the code for follicular adenocarcinoma, and we code to 2 for moderately differentiated. The moderately differentiated is in the diagnostic. 8332 is the code for moderately differentiated follicular adenocarcinoma, and then we are double coding once again because moderately differentiated is in the diagnostic term, so you're using grade 2 as the code. So once again, that's Rule G, double code. Okay, the answer for number 7, CIN3, is 8077/29. CIN3 is an in situ. It's the code, the behavior is in situ, and the grade will be 9 because there was no mention of grade. Idiopathic hemorrhagic thrombocythemia, code is 9962/39. Once again, grade 9 because there's no mention of grade. For number 9, we have myxofibrosarcoma, which we went through in the lecture. That is 82811/39, which is Rule J with compound morphology diagnosis. Right? So once again, myxofibrosarcoma is not listed in the index, so we break it down to the roots, myxofibron sarcoma, and we switch it around and we look up fibromyxosarcoma, and we would see that the code for this is 8811/39. Number 10, the code for this is 8560/39. This is Rule K, which looks at combination words, right, in morphology. So we have adenocarcinoma and squamous carcinoma, which is an adenosquamous carcinoma. You use the alphabetic index and you look it up, and you see the code for that is 8560/3. And once again, you put 9 as the grade because there's no mention of grade. And finally, number 11, we have transitional cell epidermoid carcinoma, which is something we went through in the lecture as well. This is once again Rule K, looking at code to the higher morphology. Once again, you would look up transitional cell carcinoma and epidermoid carcinoma, and you choose the code for the higher. You choose the higher code, which would be 8120/39. Right? And there we have all the answers. Do we have any questions? Needs for clarification?
If you have any questions and you'd like to use your mic, I believe there's an option to raise your hand, or just message in the chat. We have a question. Can you review Rule K? Sorry, so the last two questions.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so are you all seeing the PowerPoint slide once again?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay, so Rule K. So Rule K speaks to, let me just double check something here, making sure you're seeing the right screen because I'm seeing, okay, right. Rule K speaks to coding of, just now, I'm just having a little bit of technical difficulties here.
We're seeing the presentation slide, examples, Rule K.
Okay, all right. Well, then you're seeing the right thing. Because on my screen, it wasn't showing up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was just making sure. Okay. Right. So we have Rule K, which speaks to coding multiple morphology terms, right? What this rule says is that you look for a code that represents the combined morphology, right? Because common combinations may have a unique code. These combinations usually say mix, combined, or and, right? For example, mixed embryonal carcinoma and teratoma is a pterocarcinoma, and there's a code for teratocarcinoma in the index. Secondly, ductal carcinoma and lobular carcinoma there's a code for that in the index. It is 8522/3. Right? And then we went through some examples, such as carcinosarcoma. If you look up in the alphabetic index, you will see a code for carcinosarcoma 8980/3. Adenocarcinoma and squamous carcinoma is an adenosquamous carcinoma. If you look up adenosquamous carcinoma in the alphabetic index, you will see a code for it 8560/3. And small cell, large cell carcinoma, once again, if you look in the alphabetic index, you will see a code for it 8045/3. Now, in the case of all of these are combination that are regularly seen, so there were codes created for them in the book. However, in some cases, there's mixed tumors of different morphologies that are not common enough that there's a code for the combination in the book. And in these cases, you code to the higher number, right? So the example they use here is adenoid cystic spindle cell carcinoma. There's a code for adenoid cystic carcinoma, and there's a code for spindle cell carcinoma. But there's no code for the mixed term. So therefore, in this case, you look up spindle cell carcinoma, which is 8032/3, and you look up adenoid cystic carcinoma, which is 8200/3. And you would code to the morphology, you would code the morphology to the higher number, which is 8200/3. Once again, transitional cell epidermoid carcinoma, no combination code. Transitional cell carcinoma is 8120/3. Epidermoid carcinoma is 8070/3. You code the morphology to the higher number, which is 8120/3. Lastly, mixed mesothelioma and neuroendocrine carcinoma. Once again, there's no code for this combination in the book. So you look up mesothelioma, which is 9050, and you look up neuroendocrine carcinoma, which is 8246/3, and you use the code for mesothelioma, which is 9050/3, because it is the higher code. However, the exception to this rule is, first of all, it does not apply to separate tumors. It only applies to tumors that are mixed. And secondly, for the hematopoietic diseases, you code to the more specific histology over the higher code. For example, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma is 9680/3, while mantle cell lymphoma is 9673/3. Now, with the rule, it would say to code to the higher code, but in this case, you code into the more specific histology. And if you look in the book, you would see that 9680/3 includes a not otherwise specified term and 27 synonyms. Now, this is if you go in the numerical list for the morphology, and just flip to 9680/3, you would see the not otherwise specified term to the top and 27 synonyms. But if you were to flip to 9673/3, you would see it has no not otherwise specified term and fewer synonyms. Therefore, that is the more specific histology, and in this case, you code to 9673/3. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a few more. Okay, so that was, can you review how we arrived at the digits that represent the grade code for the cancers?
Okay, so what it is, the grade is usually listed in the pathology, right? On page 66 and 67 in the physical book, you would see the listing of all the different grades. And how it is you would arrive to the digit is because it would be stated in the diagnostic statement. For example, grade 2 papillary transitional cell carcinoma, or infiltrating moderate to poorly differentiated duct carcinoma, right? On the pathology report, you would actually see it stated. And once you see the grade is stated, once you see that word differentiation or you see the word grade, that is dealing with that 6 digits, and you code to suit. The list of the codes for the different grades are once again on that page 66, 67, which is kind of to the middle of the book. And if it is you do not see anything discussing the grade in the diagnostic statements, such as idiopathic hemorrhagic thrombocythemia, there's no mention of grade, there's no mention of differentiation, you code to 9 because the grade is unknown.
Thank you. Jermaine, let us know if that was clear. There was another question from BVI saying she had a slight problem applying the grade, but I think you just answered that, so that's
yeah,
fine.
The grade is not anything that you would need to look up in the book other than to verify what code to use based on what the pathology report states, because on the pathology reports it would actually state grade 2 ductal carcinoma or moderately differentiated, which is once again grade 2 ductal carcinoma. And if you look to that page in the book, you will see the different terms they use for grade, because it would either be grade 1 or it would say well differentiated. It would either say grade 2 or moderately differentiated, etc.
And then you find that table with the grades and the codes.
Yeah, it's in the book.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect. There's one other question about will we get the PowerPoint presentations? So again, I know the PowerPoint presentation would be very useful. Right now, you will have access to the recorded session for each of the webinars. You might have missed this at the beginning, but NCOSI is going to send you an email later today with a username and password to access a forum space that the Caribbean Cancer Registry Hub has. And in the forum space, you will be able to download a copy of the recorded session for each of the webinars. So you'll be able to see the PowerPoint slides and NKC's description of what to do. In terms of sharing the actual PDF files, we just need to confirm this with IARC, and I'll try to do that by the end of this week to let you know. I wasn't able to connect with him last week as I had planned, but I should be able to have a discussion with him tomorrow morning. So I will let you know about sharing the presentation slides as well. Okay, but you will get a recorded, you'll be able to download the video of the recorded webinar, and you'll be able to review that at your leisure. Okay.
Okay, there's just one last part to go through. That wouldn't take very long, but it deals with putting together everything that we learned, right? And that is when you get a pathology report, how it is you're going to code the topography together with the morphology, right? So the suggestion they gave, that is given, is you break the phrase into topography and morphology, right? You look up the morphology first, right? And in particular, that is so that as we went through, some morphologies have a suggested site code already, which would already help cut your time in half for coding. And then when you're looking up the morphology, you look up the unusual term first. For example, if it is you see adenoid cystic carcinoma, carcinoma is the most common term in that statement, so look up adenoid, right? Because it usually will have less words and it'll be quicker to find the code. You use up all the words in the phrase, right? Once you're looking up the code, and then you would add the 5th and 6th digit codes based on the words that you're seeing in the pathology report, such as infiltrating, which would indicate that it's malignant and behavior 3. And then if it is you see intermediate differentiation, that would mean that it's grade 2. So, and then you would look up the topography if it is necessary after you finish doing all that. So once again, you look up the morphology first, you look up the unusual term first, you use up all the words in the phrase, you add the 5th and 6th digit codes, and you look up the topography if necessary. For example, we have here a poorly differentiated hepatocellular carcinoma of the right lobe of the liver. You're breaking it into topography and morphology. We know that the topography here is right lobe of liver. We know the morphology here is poorly differentiated hepatocellular carcinoma. So what is the morphology? Poorly differentiated, well, being specific, it's hepatocellular carcinoma. So you look that up and you go to your book and you go to H and you look up. Once again, hepatocellular is the more unusual term, so you look up hepatocellular instead of going to carcinoma, right? You go to H and you look up hepatocellular, and then you will see carcinoma, not otherwise specified, as 8170/3. The suggested site code for the topography is included in the index, so you already have your topography, which is the liver, right? What else do we know? The cancer is poorly differentiated, which is the grade, which is /3, right? The 6 digit is 3. So altogether, you know the complete code will be C220-8170/33. Right? So once again, you're breaking the term down into morphology and topography. We know topography is right lobe of liver. Morphology is hepatocellular carcinoma. We look up hepatocellular carcinoma first. We see that we have a suggested site code, which is the topography. So we already have our topography. And what else do we know? What is all the terms within the diagnostic statement? Poorly differentiated, 6 digit. We know poorly differentiated is grade 3. So therefore, the complete code will be C220-8170/33. Example 2. Once again, we're breaking the diagnostic statement down into histology, which is morphology, and the topography. What is the morphology? It's adenocarcinoma, not otherwise specified, because that's all we have, adenocarcinoma. When we go to A and we look up adenocarcinoma, and we see the code is 8140/3, right? What else do we know? We know that the diagnostic statement said that it was moderately differentiated, which is grade 2, right? That's the 6 digit, so we have our 6 digit. And now we look at the topography, right? Because there was no suggested site code next to adenocarcinoma. We know the topography is prostate. We look up prostate under P, and we get that the code for prostate is C61.9. So the total code, the complete code would be C61.9-8140/32. Right? Because that is us using all the words in the diagnostic statement to come up with the code. Okay, so we're looking at just our group exercise for morphology. We could just go through this quickly because we just did exercises on morphology, right? Medullary adenocarcinoma, looking up M, looking under M for medullary, and then you find adenocarcinoma, the code is 8510/3. Acute myelomonocytic leukemia, you go to, now remember when we spoke in the beginning, they spoke about how the leukemias are listed once. So you'd have to go to L for leukemia and look under all the terms in alphabetical order. You look for acute, and then you look under acute for myelomonocytic, and you get the code 98673. Malignant neuroastrocytoma. Once again, you go under N, you look up neuroastrocytoma. We see, but it says malignant. We see the code for neuroastrocytoma, other than the fact that it has obsolete next to it. It says that the code is 9505/1. However, the diagnostic statement said that it's malignant. So therefore, even though it's not listed in the book, we would change the code to 3. And then we have a mixed tumor, which is a seminoma and teratocarcinoma, right? When we look in the book, we notice that there's no combined code for this. So then we look up the code for seminoma. Seminoma not otherwise specified. Oh no, if it is, you look, oh no, right. Now it's very careful because there is a code here for seminoma and teratoma mixed. But this is not a teratoma, this is a teratocarcinoma. Right, so we look up, we see the code for seminoma is 90613, right? And then we look up the code for teratocarcinoma, which is 9081/3. So therefore we use 9081/3, which is the higher code. Right? And we have about 20 more minutes. And in these, before I go to that, is there any more questions?
No more have come in as yet.
Okay. Well, I just want like maybe in 10 minutes, just for you all to practice what it is we just did with respect to coding entire diagnostic statements. I would just like that you all attempt the first 4 questions of what we're seeing here just now. Let me just share that with you all. Okay, so just attempt to code. This is the complete code, topography and morphology. The first 4 questions of exercise 3. And we'll like just get, because we are finishing at midday. So I'll just give you all 10 minutes to see how much you all could get through, just so you can get a feel of coding entire diagnostic statements. And we'll check back at 11:50 just to quickly go through those answers. Okay, guys, just to make sure that we finish in time, I just want to go through the answers to that those first 4 questions and code in the entire code, right? So the first question is for bronchogenic carcinoma. So as suggested, the first thing we do is we break the diagnostic statement into morphology and topography. We know carcinoma is the morphology, and what I would usually do, the first thing I would do is look to see if it is they have the term bronchogenic under carcinoma as a descriptive form. There is no bronchogenic, so we know that bronchogenic is referring to the topography, which is the lungs, the bronchioles, right? There's no mention of what subsite. So it's just the general code. So we code carcinoma, 80-10-3. We don't know anything else about the grade, so we put it as 9. There's no mention of grade. And for bronchogenic, we code it to C34-9, which is for lung, right? For number 2, we have lobular carcinoma in situ of the upper outer quadrant of the right breast. Once again, breaking it into topography and morphology, we have the morphology, lobular carcinoma in situ, and we have the topography, which is the upper outer quadrant of the right breast. So we code lobular carcinoma in situ first. Once again, we look up lobular because it is the more unusual term, so therefore it will be easier to find. And when we go to L, we find lobular carcinoma as 85-20, but it's in situ, it's not malignant, so we put the behavior as 2, right? There's no mention of grade once again, so we code that as unknown, which is 9. And now we go to code the topography. It doesn't matter if it's the right or left breast. The code for breast would remain the same, so we look up under breast, and then we look for the code for the upper outer quadrant, which is C50.4. Right? Question 3. Hepatoma, right? We see, this is just one word, there's no mention of the topography. So we just look up the hepatoma. Under H, we see the code for hepatoma is 8170/3. Once again, there's no mention of the grade, so we code it to 9. And we see next to hepatoma, not otherwise specified, a suggested site code of C22.0. We have no mention of any other site, so therefore we take the suggested site code as Rule H states, site-associated morphology. So the total code here would be C22.08170/39. And finally, number 4, we have myxofibrosarcoma of the corpus uteri. Breaking the diagnostic term down into morphology and topography, we have myxofibrosarcoma as the morphology, which we look up first. We just went through that as one of the compound morphologies. We know myxofibrosarcoma is not any alphabetic index, but fibromyxosarcoma is there. So we look up fibromyxosarcoma and we get 8811/3-9. We code to 9 because the grade is unknown. And once that is complete, we now code the topography. we go to the alphabetic index and we look up corpus uteri on the C. And we see the code for that is C54.9. Okay, so those are the answers for the first 4. How did you all do? We could quickly take some questions. We have 5 more minutes.
No questions have come in. I'm not seeing any. Oh, a question just came in.
Ava.
Oh.
Ava said she got 3.5 right. That's very good, Ava.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much, Casey, once again for taking us through. So that's now we've covered topography and morphology, which is great.
Yes.
If there are any questions after, please feel free to email me or Nkosi. You've been getting the emails from Nkosi about the webinar, and we will follow up with you on that. Again, you can expect an email from Nkosi later today with your username and password and instructions for how to log into the forum and find this webinar series so that you can download the recorded sessions. I know for sure last week's session has been uploaded. I'm not sure if Nkosi will be able to upload this session by this afternoon, maybe?
Maybe, probably.
Maybe. So if it's not there today, it'll be there shortly.
Yeah, definitely by tomorrow.
Perfect. There's one more question.
Okay, I'm seeing Ms. Simpson said that she got 8250/39 for number 1. I just wanted to address that. Now, the terms in the book are very specific. So the cancer was stated as a bronchogenic carcinoma, and that code is for a bronchiolar carcinoma, and it's not the same thing. The bronchogenic in the case of this diagnostic statement was referring to the fact that it was located in the lung and not a specific type of cancer. So you just have to be very careful. Yeah, just keep to how specific the terms are.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
So the 810/3 is the morphology for carcinoma not otherwise specified.
Carcinoma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Great. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for participating. I hope it was useful. Oh, we have Ava. Said she got something different from number 4.
Oh, that's 8840 is for myxosarcoma. But the morphology said myxofibrosarcoma, which is a different cancer because it's a mixed tumor. So therefore, the correct code for that would have been for fibromyxosarcoma.
Exactly. Okay. Perfect. Great. Thanks, everybody, very much. Oh, another question came in. Oh, y'all are sneaky. Okay. Just to say thank you. Okay, excellent. Thanks very much, everybody, for participating. You'll get an email soon from Nkosi, and we look forward to seeing you back here next week, Wednesday.
Okay, bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Nkosi. Bye.